So let me just introduce Professor Tiwari, our head of the department, with you.
Okay.
Professor Tiwari, are you around?
Yeah, I'm here. Welcome, Professor Jhumpa Adhikari. Yeah.
Let me just try to make this big again. It seems to be doing strange stuff. Thank you for inviting me, Professor Tiwari. It was very nice of you.
Sure, yeah. We have, webinar series kind of thing, and we invite all eminent professors and experts in the field, including from R&D institutions also. And one of the experts have been from United Nations very recently on sustainability aspects. So,
No, it was very nice of you to invite me, and it's been fantastic meeting that you have taken two of our students. I know Nirmalya also, and Angan, of course, did his PhD with me only. So thank you for that too.
we can share your presentation. Do you agree to that, or is there any?
So is it causing trouble while going full screen? If you don't have any animation, then we can go to the PDF file itself that you shared.
Actually, I made changes.
Okay.
I was sitting and making changes just now, so I haven't sent that PDF file to Angan yet.
No, but if you have the PDF file, then you can use that PDF instead of the presentation. That might be easier.
But presentation is coming good, as it's coming well.
But while making full screen, that probably was there a problem while making full screen?
No, it's just it's just I'm trying to see which grid layout works well.
It has come. It is full screen now.
So then it's fine. Then it's fine. Then it's perfectly fine.
So can we start?
Yes.
Tiwari?
Yeah, we can start.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Department of Chemical Engineering, IIT Jodhpur, it is my immense pleasure to invite Professor Jhumpa Adhikari to the department webinar series of the Department of Chemical Engineering at IIT Jodhpur. Among the department's all theme areas, Professor Adhikari's research is aligned towards the molecular engineering. Professor Adhikari has received her PhD in 2004 from the University at Buffalo, the State University of New York at Buffalo, USA, after completion of her BE honors in chemical engineering from the then known Regional Engineering College, now known as NIT Durgapur, West Bengal, India. Professor Jhumpa Adhikari is currently a professor in the Department of Chemical Engineering at IIT Bombay. I personally had the privilege to work with her during my PhD, and she still remains to me to be my guide and mentor. Her research interest includes the study of phase equilibria for simple model systems as well as for real systems using Monte Carlo simulations, computer-aided molecular design frameworks for the design of task-specific molecules, computational schemes for rational solvent design, prediction of thermodynamic properties of for industrial important polymerization systems using molecular simulations, and the design of compound semiconductor alloys using molecular simulations. Professor Adhikari has more than 300 citations with an H index of 9. In today's webinar, she had kindly agreed to give a talk on the topic phase equilibria using Monte Carlo simulation technique. Professor, we are very glad to have you here with us today. And I now ask our HOD, Professor Pradeep, to kindly welcome our eminent speaker for today's session. Thank you. Over to you, Professor Pradeep.
Thank you, Angan. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Professor Jhumpa Adhikari from IIT Bombay. Of course, as far as our department is concerned, you know, we have several thrust areas and the traditional areas of chemical engineering, and we give a lot of importance to the emerging areas, demand-driven areas, and traditional areas of chemical engineering. And we have recently come out with your support, with the support of the students, our first inaugural issue of departmental newsletter, that is ChemiBuzz, which has been recently released on 31st of March by the student team of Yogendra, Siddhartha, and Vikram, mentored by Professor Ramesh and Professor Prashant. We congratulate you all for that. We have received very positive comments, very positive feedback from the audience all over the country, including the international audience. Some of the comments I have shared also with you, with the editorial team, and probably they may publish some of the important comments in the next issue. So for that, I congratulate you all and request the students to continue to participate in an active manner in the different teams you are representing. Coming to the today's webinar, you know, it's a 5th webinar in the series, and we have the webinar on the AI in process control, wealth from waste from R&D laboratories. We have on the sustainability aspects from the United Nations Environmental Program expert. We have a webinar on the flow stability analysis from academia, IIT Kanpur. And this is 5th from Professor Jhumpa Adhikari on the phase equilibria. And phase equilibrium using Monte Carlo simulation techniques. And phase equilibria plays very important role. It plays an important role in chemical engineering R&D, including in the plant operation, new process development, the innovation in existing processes. So it's a very important talk we are going to hear from Professor Adhikari. Over to you, Professor Adhikari. We are waiting for you, and I hope you won't mind if we ask few questions in
Please,
between.
please.
Or maybe
Thank you so much for the kind words. And thank you for the invitation. And Professor Pradeep Tiwari has already given the motivation for why phase equilibria is important. So let me begin without taking up too much of your time, and show how phase equilibria is determined using Monte Carlo simulation techniques. So phase equilibria, as Professor Tiwari just said, is very important because it is crucial for the design and optimization of separation processes and has applications in industry as well as in academia. So one of the ways of determining phase equilibria, especially when experiments are difficult to perform because they are unfeasible or the molecules decompose or they are very expensive, one of the alternative and very powerful tools is molecular simulation approach. So today, molecular simulations have algorithms which are very efficient and allow us to look at real life problems where here I will be showing a case study on the extraction of a pharmaceutical intermediate, R-phenylacetyl carbinol. And also previously, we have looked at mixing miscibility diagrams for compound semiconductors. An example is shown here. The molecular simulation approach also allows us to look at qualitatively accurate, very simple potential models to obtain understanding of, say, effects of confinement on fluid phase equilibria, which is what Professor Sengupta did in his PhD. So a case study on that is also, while it's not on confinement, on the triangle well fluids is also included here. And we have also looked at the mixtures, binary mixtures of triangle well fluids as well as for real systems like N-alkanes. If we have time remaining, I will be showing a little bit of that also. Please feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions. The outline of the talk, in this talk, I will be focusing on the vapor-liquid equilibrium of pure substances and looking at different molecular simulation techniques to predict phase equilibria. The first of which is the single box Metropolis Monte Carlo method in the isothermal isobaric ensemble. Then I will look at two box methods, Gibbs ensemble Monte Carlo, where I will be looking at the case study for R-phenyl acetyl carbonyl, and also the Gibbs-Duhem integration, which is a method which was developed by my advisor, Professor David Kopke. And this particular method has an advantage over GMC, while we will not be talking about it too much here, is that when one of the phases is dense, then we can use this method easily. But this method is particularly useful when you are looking at solid phases. And then we will look at a very more recent method called the transition matrix Monte Carlo method, which is the implementation in the grand canonical ensemble will be used, and the case study we will be looking at is the triangle well fluid. Most of these methods, except for the transition matrix Monte Carlo method, is available in detail in this particular textbook by Frenkel and Smith. So you're all familiar with thermodynamics. Those of you who are in second year chemical engineering will be familiar with classical thermodynamics. So thermodynamics has Greek roots, therme meaning heat and dynamis meaning power. So classical thermodynamics began as the study of the motive power of heat with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, which began with the invention of steam engine by James Watt. And today's definition has expanded thermodynamics into dealing with energy and its transformations and the bounds of these transformations, as well as properties of matters and the correlations that exist between properties of matter. Classical thermodynamics, as you know, is an engineering science which is based on experiment and gives the macroscopic viewpoint of systems. That is, you look at observable properties, but do not take into account the existence of atoms and molecules which actually constitute matter. So the question that arises is, how do those macroscopic observable properties depend on the behavior of atoms or molecules? And that is the question which statistical thermodynamics answers. So before we look at what is statistical thermodynamics, just remind you about what is vapor-liquid equilibrium. And vapor-liquid equilibrium is very easy to locate experimentally. So if you are at relatively low temperatures and pressures, at the coexistence condition, you will just see that an initially homogeneous phase separates into two coexisting phases. In this case, vapor-liquid. Vapor phase and a liquid phase separated by an interface, and the order parameter would be something like the density. So the density of the vapor phase and the density of the liquid phase would be very, very different. And you are also very familiar with the criteria for vapor-liquid equilibrium, where the temperature of the two phases is equal, the pressure of the two phases is equal, and is equal to the vapor pressure. And the molar Gibbs free energy of the two phases is equal when I is the pure substance. In the pressure temperature plane, you have this is your vaporization line, vaporization curve. It starts at the triple point and ends at the critical point. And in the PV plane, this is how it looks. Okay, this is the saturated liquid line here. This is the saturated vapor line, and this encloses the vapor liquid coexistence region. So now, going to what is statistical thermodynamics. Statistical thermodynamics is the theory that connects the macroscopic viewpoint with the microscopic viewpoint, and was developed at the end of the 19th century by two scientists in particular, Boltzmann and Josiah Gibbs. And originally, this was based on the classical or Newtonian view of how atoms move and interact with each other, which is an approximation, but generally quite adequate. Now, because the name statistics is there, or statistical is there, that is because, so this, the microscopic viewpoint, therefore, it uses the fact that there are a large number of molecules involved. So remember, 1 mole of a substance is 6.02 into 10 to the power 23 molecules. So so what statistical thermodynamics looks at the microscopic viewpoint, and what it says is that any observation of the macroscopic world is necessarily an observation of some statistics of the molecular behavior. Now, to understand what is this and to relate this to the Monte Carlo techniques that I will be discussing in just a few minutes, we need to know some concepts. So the first concept we need to know is the concept of a microstate. A microstate is nothing but the definition, a complete definition of the positions and momenta of all the atoms in the system. Okay, so let us for ease consider monoatomic molecules in our system, and you look at the position and momenta of all these atoms, then you have a microstate. Now, an ensemble, it actually corresponds to the system in the classical thermodynamics, and is defined as a collection of microstates of a system of molecules having in common, sharing 3 common macroscopic properties, at least one of which has to be extensive. Okay, and the ensemble is also associated with a probability distribution which accords a weight to each microstate of an ensemble. Okay, so now the 4 common ensembles are the microcanonical ensemble, the canonical ensemble, and the isothermal isobaric ensemble, as well as the grand canonical ensemble. Now, I said the ensembles correspond to the systems in classical thermodynamics. So in classical thermodynamics, we have 3 different systems: isolated system, the open system, and the closed system. Now, in the isolated system, you remember the number of the mass transfer and energy transfer is not allowed. Now look at the microcanonical ensemble. In the microcanonical ensemble, the number of particles n is fixed. The internal energy of the system is fixed. So the microcanonical ensemble actually represents the isolated system at constant volume. Okay, so therefore, it is a collection of microstates which share 3 extensive properties here, N, V, and E, and is associated with a probability distribution which is uniform. And the schematic for the microstates is shown here. You can see here the number of particles is 4. So this is a slide from my professor's lectures. And this is the schematic which shows that the microstates all have the same N. Now let us look at the canonical ensemble. In the canonical ensemble, the 3 macroscopic properties which are shared by all the microstates are N, V, and T. Okay. Now here, the number of particles is fixed and the temperature is fixed. So the canonical ensemble actually represents a closed system. N is fixed, so there is no mass transfer, which is in thermal equilibrium. That is, the closed system is immersed in a heat bath so that the energy is exchanged to keep the temperature constant. So here the microstates have varying energies, but the number of particles are the same. So you can see in the schematic the microstates all have the 4 particles. And the probability distribution here is given by this expression here. This is the Boltzmann's distribution, and beta is given by 1 by kT. The next ensemble is the isothermal isobaric ensemble, where the number of particles is fixed and the 2 intensive properties, pressure and temperature, are also fixed. This represents a closed system in thermal and mechanical equilibrium. Here, the microstates have varying energies and volumes. The probability distribution is shown here. Here, see, they have varying volumes, so the schematic shows the microstates. The number of particles remains constant at 4, but the volume is varying. So these are the microstates which constitute the isothermal isobaric ensemble. Now the grand canonical ensemble, the last ensemble remaining, obviously represents the open system. Here the chemical potential mu is fixed, the volume, which is an extensive property, is fixed, and the temperature is fixed. It's an open system, so you can have exchange of energy and mass. So therefore, here the microstates have varying energy as well as different numbers of molecules. So here the probability distribution is shown here. And you can see in this microstates, in this schematic here, the microstates have varying number of particles. These probabilities, particularly this probability distribution, is described by the first postulate of statistical mechanics, which says that that in the microcanonical ensemble, all microstates of equal energy are accorded the same weight. So look at the microcanonical ensemble. All the microstates have the same energy E, and if they are to be accorded the same weight as per the first postulate, then you have the uniform probability distribution, which is what is shown here. And the next postulate is the ergodic hypothesis, which says time average is equal to ensemble average. So I was just now talking to Professor Nirmalya, and he was saying that he does molecular dynamics. So when you do molecular dynamics simulations, you calculate the time average of the property. Whereas when you do Monte Carlo, you calculate the ensemble average, and when you reach equilibrium, then the time average is equal to the ensemble average. That is, once you have equilibrium, it is immaterial whether you are doing molecular dynamics or whether you are doing Monte Carlo. The 2 values of the properties, the average value of the properties, the time average and the ensemble average, have to be equal. So once we have gotten this slight introduction into stat thermo, then this concept of ensembles and microstates is related to the Monte Carlo simulation techniques for phase equilibrium, which I will be discussing now. So the first method that I will be discussing looks at single box Metropolis Monte Carlo in the isothermal and isobaric ensemble. So in this particular ensemble, the most straightforward way to study phase behavior would be to look at a 1-box simulation in the NPT ensemble, where you look at first, say you look at constant pressure and change the temperature of the given system and simply observe where phase transformation occurs. This is something we did with a system for epsilon caprolactam at 1 atmosphere. So epsilon caprolactam is the monomer for nylon 6, and in the presence of water, it dimerizes and polymerizes. So therefore, it's fairly difficult to do experiments with epsilon caprolactam, because if you even expose it to the atmosphere, it absorbs water and dimerizes and polymerizes and so on and so forth. So therefore, what we did was we did this molecular simulation study where we looked at the constant pressure of 1 atmosphere and looked at the molar volume as our order parameter, which will change when phase transformation occurs. And these are the results that we got. And this is what is shown here. However, this is a very simple thing, but there is a penalty associated with the simplicity. That is that this exhibits a hysteresis. That is, if the boiling point were somewhere here, it would overshoot and go here. So, and if you were to now look at, so here you have the, you have this converting into this, but if you were to go in the reverse, if you were to follow in the reverse manner where you have a higher volume vapor phase getting converted into a liquid phase, that is, if you were looking at the condensation part and you were going this way, then you would actually, which we haven't done, you would actually see an area where the hysteresis would be visible, and your melting point and your, sorry, not melting point here, your boiling point would be difficult to estimate because you now have an area and you don't know where exactly the boiling point is. So why does this happen? Why does this hysteresis show up? Because there is a large interfacial free energy separating the liquid and the vapor phases. So therefore, doing simulations in such a manner are not really very useful. So what is the alternative? The alternative is doing direct simulations, and particularly the one that is nowadays used very commonly is the Gibbs ensemble Monte Carlo method, because here you look at the simulation of the vapor liquid equilibrium without creating an interface. An interface is problematic because there are, if you have a system and you introduce an interface, a large number of particles are at the interface. So you have to really go for a very large system to study bulk phase equilibrium. So to avoid that, Panagiotopoulos developed this Gibbs ensemble Monte Carlo method. And for pure fluids, the method is called the GEMC NVT method. So in this particular method, Panagiotopoulos started with two boxes, a vapor box and a liquid box, representing the two coexisting phases. A practical tip to run the simulations here is to use the fewer molecules and a larger box size for the vapor box as compared to the liquid box, and then allow your simulation to run. Okay. Now, if you remember, in one of the earlier slides, I said that the criteria for phase equilibria is temperature is equal, pressure is equal, and chemical potential is equal. So, you know, the most useful ensemble would be a mu-TP ensemble. The most useful ensemble to study phase equilibria would be a mu-TP ensemble. But such an ensemble does not exist because, as we looked at the definition of ensemble, it is a collection of microstates which share three common properties, yes, but at least one property has to be extensive. And in the mu-TP ensemble, all three properties are intensive. So what Panagiotopoulos suggested was that let us introduce, or he introduced this Gibbs ensemble, which was a combination of the NVT ensemble, which allows temperature to be equal, the mu-VT ensemble, which allows chemical potential to be equal, and the NPT ensemble, which allows pressure to be equal. So that is how we get phase equilibrium. Now, in the NVT ensemble, if you remember, or for those of you who already know, in the NVT ensemble, the Monte Carlo move is the displacement of particles, is the random displacement of particles. And this is done for both boxes using the acceptance ratio or the acceptance as shown here. Okay, so this is identical to your conventional Metrombolis Monte Carlo in the NVT ensemble, and you do it separately in the two boxes to maintain the temperatures of the two boxes to be equal. Next, this shows the transfer of particles. Here it is showing a transfer of particle from the liquid phase to the vapor phase. Okay, so this is a particle exchange, and here the total number of particles is kept constant. Okay, so the number of particles in the liquid box and the number of particles in the vapor box in the individual boxes change, but the total number of particles remain constant. So you can see here NL minus 1 plus NG plus 1. Okay, so this is what is happening here. Now, so what you are doing is you are deleting a particle from the liquid phase and inserting the particle in the vapor phase, and the acceptance you have is given by this expression here. So here we need to remember some things, such as it is required that a reasonable number of particle exchange moves be accepted, so that we get the simulation to be correct. So therefore, what happens is that it cannot be used when one of the phases is a dense liquid. Why not? Because, so see, if you insert a particle and there is another particle, so if it is a dense phase, then there are a lot of particles packed into that box. And if you now try to push another particle into that box, there is likely to be an overlap. And if there is an overlap, then then that move is going to be rejected, and you are not going to have the first statement here, that is a reasonable number of particle exchange moves have to be accepted. And another disadvantage of Gibbs ensemble Monte Carlo is that it cannot be used while we are not looking at that system. It cannot be used if one of the coexisting phases is a solid phase, because insertion or deletion moves introduce defects. So that is one thing. And then there is also now we have to keep the pressure equal also. To keep the pressure equal, you now move the volume so that you change the volume, so that the volume of, if you are increasing the volume of the liquid phase by delta V, you have to decrease the volume of the vapor phase by the same delta V. That is, you have to keep the total volume of the system, that is the liquid plus vapor boxes, to be constant. And the acceptance there is given by the expression here. So using these three moves, you have the Gibbs ensemble Monte Carlo technique. And then we need to look at how the implementation itself is done. So for the implementation itself, the preference is that the trial moves are selected randomly, so that all the trial moves are on an average equivalent, and you measure any of the properties after a predetermined number of Monte Carlo cycles. Okay, so this is what is the preferred way of doing it. An alternate method, which is not suggested that it be used, would be performing these simulations in a fixed sequence. So you first do n attempts for a random displacement of particles, one attempt to randomly change the volume, and n try attempts to change the particles. But what happens here is, the huge disadvantage that you have here is that it is possible that if you stop at any point, at what point it stops, it has an influence on the average properties that you are calculating. So therefore, to avoid that, it is better to select the trial moves randomly. Now, how do we know that so we have implemented our GMC simulation and we have got some results. So now it becomes, how do we know that these results are reliable? To know that these results are reliable, we need to, of course, know that the equilibrium condition should be satisfied. That is, temperature is equal, pressure is equal, and the chemical potential is equal. However, when you look at the computation of computed values of the pressure and chemical potential in the coexisting liquid phase, you will find that there are large fluctuations in these values. So therefore, what other additional analysis of data that can be done? One of the additional analysis of data, which is suggested by Frenkel and Smith, is to plot the fraction of the volume occupied by each box versus the fraction of the number of particles occupied by each box. And you will find that because the boxes are of finite size, so when you are doing GMC, one of the advantages, which I should have mentioned previously, is that you can use relatively small boxes. So usually the system size varies between 64 to 500 for pure substances. So because the box sizes are finite, you will see clustering of the data around 2 points which represent the vapor phase and the liquid phase respectively. So we will look at this in more detail when we look at the case studies, but we should remember some of the problems with doing GEMC simulation arise when we come close to the critical point. Now, when you're coming close to the critical point, the vapor and the liquid phases, the interface which is separating the vapor and the liquid phases, there is a very small interfacial free energy barrier which is associated with close to the critical point. So what happens is in a simulation, the boxes start changing identity. So VLE cannot be observed at the close to the critical point using GEMC simulations. So that being the disadvantage of GEMC. But let us look into this problem that where we determine the vapor liquid equilibrium of R-phenyl acetyl carbonyl using GEMC. So the overall problem was the rational design of task-specific solvents for the extraction of RPAC. But what I will be focusing here is just the GEMC part. So what is RPAC? RPAC is used in the synthesis of L-ephedrine, which is an ingredient of cold and influenza medication. RPAC itself is synthesized from, sorry about that. RPAC itself is synthesized from the biotransformation of glucose and benzaldehyde using a whole cell fermentation process via the baker's yeast. And it is extracted from the aqueous broth in which it is produced using an organic solvent. Current industrial practice uses toluene. And why we need to study the VLE of pure substance RPAC is so that we can design a RPAC is separated from this mixture using distillation. And if we have the properties of RPAC, then we can design a better distillation column. So one of the objectives of the work was to estimate the VLE properties of a pure RPAC. In literature, the experimental data is limited just to the boiling points at 3 pressures, 1 atmosphere, 24 kilopascals, and 0.2 kilopascals. All 3 pressures are relatively low pressures, and we cannot really extrapolate this into the critical point. Why is the critical point necessary? The critical point is necessary because if you are going to design an efficient separation process, then most of the time you are using process simulation software, which in turn use equation of state methods. So if you remember equation of states, they require input of the critical temperature, pressure, and volume. Okay? And for this molecule, experimental data is only limited to low pressures because it's an oxygen-containing molecule, and there are 2 oxygens here, and oxygen-containing compounds have a tendency to decompose at elevated temperatures. So what are the 2 ways of determining the vapor-liquid equilibrium properties? One is the conventional way of looking at equations of state. Since the critical properties are not available from experiments, these can be estimated using group contribution methods, which are quick but inherently approximate. And the other method is to use the molecular simulation approach, the accuracy of which depends upon the force field and the parameters which are involved in the force field. So I won't go into depth here, but we used 3 equations of state, the SRK, the Peng-Robinson, and the volume translated Peng-Robinson equations of state, where the inputs required are shown here. That is the critical point, then the eccentric factor, and these are the 2 parameters. To estimate the eccentric factor and the critical point and also the normal boiling point, we used a group contribution method developed by Marrero and Gunny, which uses the molecular structural information to calculate the properties, to determine the properties. And these are the properties that we determined using the group contribution methods. And as you can see here, the only point for reference from experiments is the boiling point, the normal boiling point. And you can see here all the group contribution methods are further away from the closest one is 45 Kelvin away from the experimental data. So therefore, there is a scope for using molecular simulation with lack of experimental data and the MG methods showing a variation from the boiling point. There is a scope for using Monte Carlo simulation approach. And what we did was use Gibbs ensemble Monte Carlo here for this particular molecule here. This is the picture of the molecule, RPAC, as we drew it in the software here in TOHI. And in a molecular simulation, the accuracy of the results that you obtain depend upon how good your force field is. The force field basically describes the interactions between the various, in this case, the various united atoms present in the system. So let me go directly to the analysis of the results we obtained. So one of the ways of analyzing the results is to plot the density versus the Monte Carlo cycles. And what you see is that as the Monte Carlo cycles increase, the densities evolve and settle down into the liquid phase and the vapor phase. And what this shows is that at 600 Kelvin, there are two distinct phases and it is well below the critical point. And if we plot the fraction of the volume versus the fraction of the number of particles, then we observe the clustering in two places. So one of these clusters is before the relaxation and the other one is after the relaxation. And what you observe is that there is clustering around 2 points, which indicates a vapor phase here and a liquid phase here. And so what this shows is that we have reached equilibrium. Then we plotted the chaperone plot where we plotted the vapor pressure, the logarithm of the vapor pressure versus 1 by T. And you can see the GMC result is, of course, relatively linear and also fairly close to the experimental data points, the two high temperature experimental data points. The low pressure one, we did not perform the simulations at because it would require a long time as well as a larger system size. So we did not perform here. But you can see at the two higher temperatures, we are fairly close with the GMC simulations. SRK is able to get the slope right, but the Peng-Robinson equations are not even getting the slope right, though they become close to the GMC results at the higher temperature end. So next, let us look at the coexistence curves. Now in the coexistence curves, we have plotted the coexistence densities. Here we had no comparison with data at all. So we have just compared it with the equations of state with here, this is the simultaneous regression parameters, which are supposed to be the better parameters than the stepwise parameters, which I will show later. And what you can see is that the VTPR and the GMC results are fairly close for the vapor phase. And in the liquid phase, there is some variation in the GMC results at the low temperatures, but are fairly close in the at the higher temperatures. And this is the same observation when we use the stepwise regression inputs. The critical point and eccentric factor obtained from the stepwise regression into the equations of state also, we see the same observation. So what happens with this data? We said when we began, we said that this data is necessary for to calculate the critical point so that we get the data to input into the equation of state. So what we have obtained is the temperature versus the coexistence densities for the liquid and vapor phases. And if these are fit to the scaling law, then we can obtain the critical temperature. And if we input this critical temperature here, then from the law of rectilinear diameters, that is this one, we can obtain the critical density. Once we know the critical temperature, if we fit the Antoine equation and substitute the TC value, we get the PC value. And this is what is shown in this particular column here. We have also calculated the eccentric factor. And what you observe is that the normal boiling point is actually closer to the experimental data shown here. And whereas the critical temperature is slightly higher and the critical pressure is lower than the group contribution methods, the critical volume is fairly close. The eccentric factor is way off from the ones predicted by the group contribution methods. But this is because the slope is matching the experimental data, and also because for other aromatics from experiment, it is known that the value is close to this. We think our value is the better value. And of course, our boiling point, normal boiling point, is much closer to the experimental data, is closer to the experimental data than the group contribution data. So therefore, the GEMC has the ability to predict data where data is not available. And more importantly, when you do use molecular simulation techniques, you're able to gain insights into the structure of the particular phases. So what do I mean by structure of particular phases? For example, because this molecule has two oxygen atoms, an O8 and O11, and this hydrogen H9, which have partial charges, the C10 also has a partial charge, which have partial charges. So therefore, in this particular system, even chemistry-wise, if you have an alcoholic group and this carbonyl group here, then you will expect hydrogen bonding to occur. So if you want to look at hydrogen bonding in the coexisting liquid phase, all you have to do is plot this radial distribution function. To plot this radial distribution function, and what you observe is that you observe two peaks here. So this red colored plot is for O8, this hydroxyl oxygen here, with the H9 of another molecule. So these are intermolecular radial distribution functions. And what you observe is that the first peak of the radial distribution function occurs at 1.8 angstrom. So 1.8 angstrom is your distance, separation distance for a hydrogen bond. And so the first peak occurs here and the second peak occurs at about 3. So the first peak represents the primary hydrogen bond and the second peak, the secondary hydrogen bond. And this is observed for the alcohol group. And for the carbonyl group, you can see the peak is much lower and there is no distinct secondary peak. This is one, it is explained by the partial charges. And two, it also explains what happens when the temperature increases. So when the temperature increases, you can see that the peak height has decreased. So here the peak height was above 5, and here it is just above 1.4. So it's about 1.6 or so. So what you observe is that what you expect for hydrogen bonding is that the extent of hydrogen bonding would reduce as temperature increases. And that is what is observed in this also. So basically, what molecular simulations allows you to do is gain molecular level insights into why you are getting a coexistence density of what you are seeing, what is the structure of matter, in this case, the structure of the liquid phase, all these things which can be easily done in a simulation, not just the prediction part, but also the understanding part and answering the question why we observe what we observe in the macroscopic world. So the conclusions from our GEMC study are shown here. I will not go into this, rather I will, considering that time is of importance, I will quickly go into the other methods. Another toolbox method is the Gibbs-Duhem integration method. This method was developed by David Kofke in 1993. This method involves the numerical integration of the Clapeyron equation. All of you are familiar with the Clapeyron equation. And here, because it's an integration, the disadvantage it has is that then an initial point has to be known. So therefore, this method can only be used in conjunction with another technique like the GEMC method. And because it's an integration method, we need an integration method, and the suggested method is the predictor corrector algorithm. However, the advantage of using this method is that it works when it is one of the phases is dense, or even if it is a solid, because we have no insertion or deletion of particles. Now I can write the Clapeyron equation, this particular equation, I can write it also in this form. So why write it in this form? This form is particularly useful when when we are looking at vapor liquid equilibrium, because remember the Clapeyron plot is ln(p) versus 1 by t, that is the vapor pressure, log of the vapor pressure versus 1 by t. And what you remember about that plot is that it is almost linear. So if you integrate this particular equation for VLE, you get excellent results. So what are the features of the GDI method? Coexistence with without interface, which is what you saw in GEMC also. No free energy calculations are required. Disadvantages are that numerical errors in the integration may accumulate and may result in large deviations from true coexistence curve. And any error in the initial point will lead to an incorrect estimate of the coexistent curve. So the implementation is simple. You take a step in the independent variable, calculate the slope of the equation at Ti and Pi, then predict the pressure by using this quantity here, and then perform NPT simulations. That you have two boxes and you are actually performing NPT simulations in those two boxes to calculate the slope here. Sorry, I didn't mention that before. So now you perform NPT simulations in your two boxes at the new temperature and pressure and calculate a new slope. Now in the corrector step, now you correct using the trapezoid rule, using the new value as well as the old value. And you keep repeating the corrector step until consecutive values of the vapor pressure are less than some tolerance that you define. So this is your usual predictor corrector method combined with molecular simulations, combined with classical thermodynamics and the Clapeyron equation. So this is one of the methods that you can use in conjunction with GEMC or some other method. And this is from Professor Kofke's paper, and what you can see is that he has started with a GEMC simulation. You can see the coexistence point for the GEMC simulation right there, and he has shown that the Gibbs-Duhem integration method and the GEMC simulation method actually are in excellent agreement with each other, with the GDI not requiring the particle exchange which is required in the GEMC method. Now this straight line here actually represents the addition of the densities divided by 2, which you saw in the law of rectilinear diameters. So that is what is represented by this straight line. And near the critical point, it can be used to estimate the critical density. So that is why you have this line shown here. And next, let us look at the very efficient method, which is nowadays used a lot. That is the transition matrix Monte Carlo method in the grand canonical ensemble to estimate the vapor-liquid equilibrium. Now, in the grand canonical ensemble, the two moves that are present are the atom insertion and deletion moves and the atom displacement moves. So when you are looking at the atom insertion deletion moves, then the particles change, the particle number or the number of particles changes. So you go from, if you are adding a particle or you're inserting a particle, then n goes from n to n plus 1. And if you are deleting a particle, n goes to n minus 1. So for these two moves, the acceptance is given by this expression here. And what this method, which was developed by Eddington in 2003, does is that it does the Metropolis Monte Carlo as usual, but it has a collection matrix where you are bookkeeping. So in this matrix, you have so when you are maintaining this collection matrix, you take the information for both rejection, that is rejection here, as well as acceptance. So all the methods I was describing before, you were only considering the accepted move. So if it was rejected, it would go back to the old configuration. Whereas here you look at both the accepted and rejected moves and collect information from there. So now what information are you collecting? So when you are looking at the information here, so you are going from a microstate, which is lowercase s, to a lowercase t microstate. So here, say you're going from n to n plus 1. So now you have to define a macrostate. A macrostate is nothing but a collection of microstates which share the same molecule number, here n. So if the molecule number is increasing, then the macrostate is also changing from capital S to capital T. And you have a collection matrix which says that if this particular move is accepted, then you just add the acceptance ratio to this collection matrix here. And if this move is rejected, then n remains n, and you are in the original microstate as well as macrostate. So you have, since it has been rejected, you take 1 minus a. Now, this is what happens when you have a insertion, and this is what would also happen if you had a deletion, that is n went to n minus 1. However, we also have an atom displacement move. In the atom displacement move, the number of particles doesn't change. So in the atom displacement move, the number of particles is not changing, that is n is remaining as n. So your microstate also remains the same and your macrostate also remains the same. So therefore you have, but now because it is immaterial, so whether it is accepted or rejected, your macrostate and microstate is, your microstate is changing, but your macrostate is remaining the same. The microstate is changing because the atom displacement has occurred, but the macrostate is remaining the same because the number of particles remains the same. So you just increment this by 1. So you have this collection matrix which collects the data in this particular form, and from the collection matrix you calculate the transition probability of going from macrostate S to T, and from the transition probabilities you can calculate the macrostate probabilities. The macrostate probabilities are calculated and are shown for a case study here for triangle well fluids. So in this particular case study, we wanted to understand the effect of fluid-fluid interactions on phase coexistence by using a very simple and qualitatively accurate potential model called the triangle well model in conjunction with the GCTMMC method. Why we wanted to do this was because when you do an experiment, you are looking at the cumulative effect of all the factors. But when you are looking at these simple models, you can actually, for example, change the fluid-fluid interaction range and see what effect this has on the phase behavior of the fluids. So, so we used this triangle well model, and why we used it is shown in this slide, but let me not discuss it, but go directly to the method. So once we use the transition matrix Monte Carlo method in the GC ensemble, then what we obtain is a particle number probability distribution curve. So pi n is the probability of the macrostate n, and this curve shows the log of pi n versus the density is shown here. Now this is that coexistence, and to obtain the coexistence probability distribution, you need to do a histogram reweighting, which and the reweighted coexistence chemical potentials are shown here for our example system where lambda of the potential range of the triangle well fluid is 2. So what we see is that there is a free energy barrier between the two, between the vapor phase and the liquid phase. And what you observe is that the free energy barrier, this interfacial free energy barrier, decreases as temperature increases, something that you would expect, and is reflected so very nicely in this probability distribution plot. And you also observe that the peaks of the coexisting vapors so the density of the coexisting vapor phase is increasing, whereas the density of the coexisting liquid phase is decreasing. And in this particular method, the advantage of this particular method is that once we know this distribution, then we can calculate the coexistence density and the saturation pressure just directly from the expressions which are shown here. And we can obtain graphs like this. So we can see both the coexistence curve as well as the saturation curve in the Clapeyron plot here for vapor-liquid equilibrium. And again, by using the scaling law and law of rectilinear diameters and the Antoine equation, we can obtain the critical temperature and the critical density and the critical pressure. And what we found was that the location of the critical point is strongly influenced by the value of the potential range. So when the potential range is 1.5, it is a short-ranged potential, whereas when it is 2, it is actually long-ranged. So what we found was that the critical temperature increases as the width of the potential well increases, the critical pressure correspondingly increases, and the critical density decreases. So this is also seen in the coexistence phase envelopes, which shift upwards as lambda increases. That is, as the potential range increases, it shifts upwards. And here we also see that we have also compared it with the GEMC results, and you can see that GEMC and GCTMMC are in excellent agreement. So whereas GCTMMC is the work of Professor Sengupta, the GCTMMC is the work of Professor Sengupta, the comparison is with literature data for GEMC. We haven't done the GEMC work. And like I said previously, it's very easy to calculate the saturation pressure once we know the PNPD. So here we show the saturation pressures, and what you observe is that there is a shift towards the, as the lambda increases, there is a shift towards the left for the saturation pressures. And this is the advantage of a GEMC that we have. We can so very easily calculate the saturation pressures here. Again, I'll skip this slide again here. To summarize, I have looked at 4 methods. One is a single box method, which has while it is very simple, it has a appreciable hysteresis and cannot really give reliable results. We looked at two box methods where we're looking at the interface without, we are looking at simulating the 2 vapor and liquid phases without an interface, which means that system sizes can be fairly small and they are computationally less expensive. And next we look at the computationally efficient GCTMMC method, which is a single box simulation, does not require 2 boxes. But when we combining with the histogram reweighting, we can calculate any of the coexistent properties from the particle number probability distribution. I do not know if I have time to describe binary mixtures. Should I go ahead and do that, or should I stop now?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. So next I will look at a little bit of the binary mixtures and how these are dealt with in simulations. So if you remember, for the vapor-liquid equilibrium for binary mixtures, if you remember the very nice diagram for benzene and toluene, which is almost an ideal solution, which behaves almost like an ideal solution in the liquid phase. You have the temperature is equal, the pressure is equal, and the chemical potentials are equal. Now, if I were to ask you to how to deal with this in classical thermodynamics, then you would say I would do low pressure VLE using activity coefficient method, and I would do high pressure VLE using the equation of state method. So, and now, while those are also available, we also have molecular simulation techniques, particularly where there are no experimental data to be used, that we can use. GEMC, when you are doing mixtures, you use GEMC NPT simulations, where the volume moves are no longer coupled. That is, the total volume of your system is no longer kept constant. There is also the Gibbs-Duhem integration, which can be done in conjunction with either GEMC or GCTMMC. But what I will show is this very nice picture, which was again done by one of my students for the transition matrix Monte Carlo in the GC ensemble, in the Grand Canonical ensemble. So here now, instead of the macro state, so in the pure substance, your macro state consisted of microstates all having the same particle number n. Now, because we have a binary system, the macro state consists of microstates which share the molecule number N1 and N2, N1 being the number of molecules of species 1 and N2 being the number of molecules of species 2. Now, when you have a binary mixture, in the Grand Canonical ensemble, you now have an additional move. You not just have the particle displacement moved and the particle insertion or deletion moves, which we saw before, you also have the particle identity exchange move. So why I wanted to show this was because Monte Carlo, remember, is stochastic. So therefore, you can have some unphysical moves. So if you were doing molecular dynamics, you really couldn't change the identity of the particles. But in Monte Carlo, we can do that. So we can change the identity of the particles and come to a composition. So basically, this identity change allows you to come to the equilibrium composition. So these moves are very nicely shown in this picture. So if you have the macro state here and you are inserting a particle, you can either insert a particle of species 1 or delete a particle of species 1, or insert a particle of species 2 or delete a particle of species 2. Or you can have this identity exchange. So if you have an exchange of identities, so in that case, if a species 2 is converting to a species 1, then you have N1 plus 1 and N2 minus 1. And if a species 1 were converting to a species 2, then you have N1 minus 1 and N2 plus 1. So this is how your macro states would change. And when your macro states are changing, your collection matrix is updated like this. That is, if you have an acceptance, you add the if the move is accepted, then you add the plus B, which is nothing but your Metropolis Monte Carlo acceptance. If the move is rejected, you take 1 minus B. And for particle displacement, because you are not changing the macro state at all, you just add 1. The same thing is again followed. You calculate the transition probabilities, use detail balance to calculate the macro state probabilities. So here, this axis is showing the macro state probabilities, and you have N1 and N2 shown in these. So this is N2 and this is N1. And what you see here is the surface of the probability distribution. And the contour maps are actually projected onto this part here. And if you look at this picture here, you see the contour maps and you see these 3 points. These 3 points actually correspond to the heteroisotrope here. So this is a mixture where it's a symmetric mixture. So you have the symmetric mixture of triangle well fluids. So the 2 species are actually alike, except because we are doing a model system here, we are having a weakened attraction between the unlike particles. So here the delta is what makes the particles weak, and that is the value that is shown here. And so we took 0.75 because we knew that to be giving us a heteroisotrope. So what I want to show here is that these 3 are the minima of the free energies, And from this represents the heteroazeotrope. And if you remember, if your cohesive forces were stronger than your adhesive force, then you have a positive deviation. You can see there is a positive deviation for the px curve from the Raoult's law. And because here we are looking at a temperature, a reduced temperature of 0.95, so here the VLE intersected with the LLE, and we actually observed the heteroazeotrope for this particular mixture. That is what I wanted to give you a flavor that using these simulation techniques, these Monte Carlo simulation techniques, you can predict and capture the phase behavior, however rich the phase diagram might be, as well as look at realistic systems like we did in RPAC. And finally, I want to acknowledge and thank my PhD students who contributed to the work here, including Professor Sengupta, who is now a faculty member at IIT Jodhpur, the computational resources provided by IIT Bombay and CDAC Pune, and some of this work was funded by the Department of Science and Technology, India. I also thank IIT Jodhpur for inviting me for this talk and your patience in listening to me. I did not have any questions during the talk, so if there are any questions now, I will be happy to answer those.
Thank you, madam. So any questions you can ask?
Thank you, Professor Adhikari. It was a very fantastic lecture, I think. So I got over full overview of all Monte Carlo methods. So actually, I hope all other those who don't have background also, they should be able to hear. So my question is, when you apply this kind of Monte Carlo methods to the chemically reacting systems, so
Reaction.
Yes, ma'am. So how what kind of approach is the best as far as your knowledge?
So when you are looking at reacting systems, you have to use a reaction ensemble.
Yes.
So that's So here I have looked at only phase equilibrium without chemical reactions. So if you are looking at reacting systems, you have to look at a separate ensemble, which is called the reaction ensemble. So there you say A plus B will give you C, and you have certain heuristics that you define so that this is how, if these two molecules collide, then they will form this product, that kind of thing is there. And sometimes you have these, so sometimes you would have bridges being formed, and well, it's a fairly, what should I say? It's a fairly complex thing. I'm sure you know something about it. So yes. So basically, I would have to include reaction ensemble and those kind of moves into these also to have phase equilibrium and reaction together.
So thanks, and thanks very much.
Any other questions?
I think there's a question from Himanshu. So he wrote in the chat box. It says, what are the advantage of Gibbs ensemble Monte Carlo method, and in the GDI, as it is required to initial an initial guess for the application?
GDI, okay. The Gibbs ensemble Monte Carlo method, if you saw, if you look at the picture here, the Gibbs ensemble Monte Carlo method requires this particle exchange. Now, what happens if one of the phases is very dense is that when you are trying to insert a particle into the dense phase, then the probability of overlap would be very, very high. So if the probability of the overlap is very, very high, then there won't be, those moves will not be accepted. If there is overlap, you can't have two particles occupying the same space. So if there is overlap, those moves will have extremely low probability of acceptance and they will be rejected. So if those moves are rejected, then we don't have a reasonable number of moves which are being accepted into the dense box, where insertion is occurring into the box representing the dense fluid. So therefore, GMC results are not correct because the chemical potential in the two phases is no longer correct, is no longer equal. So you cannot use GMC when you have a dense phase. You also cannot use GMC when you have a solid phase, because if you are trying to insert a particle, it will introduce an interstitial defect. And if you are trying to delete a particle, it will introduce a vacancy. So you cannot use GMC with those phases. So there in such cases, it is suggested that you use Gibbs-Duhem integration method. Okay, so in Gibbs-Duhem integration method, you have two boxes. So basically, you have two boxes, again, one representing the liquid phase and one representing the vapor phase. But you are now doing NPT simulations, separate NPT simulations at, say, Ti and Pi, and Ti and Pi, okay, with no exchange of particles between the boxes. So all you are doing is separate NPT simulation to calculate HI and VI, and in both the boxes. So HI and VI in the vapor box and HI and VI in the liquid box, and you're calculating the slope and going further. However, as you have said, the GDI is, it's an integration method, so it needs an initial starting point. So if it needs an initial starting point, you don't guess that point, you actually do another simulation. So what happens is you could do a Gibbs ensemble Monte Carlo where the density of the liquid box is relatively low. Okay, so you start there. So just like in the data here, you start there where the density of the liquid box is reasonable and where your insertions will be accepted, and then use this as your starting point to go to the and follow the numerical integration method to do GDI, that is Gibbs-Duhem integration.
Okay. I hope that answers Himanshu's question. All right. I have a small question. I don't know if it is relevant or not. So basically, as I said, I work on polymer crystallization. So there, the crystallization essentially is it's not a single temperature at which you see a crystallization, unlike inorganic particles. So it happens over a range. So I was a little confused when you said that a sharp transition is not observed in the like the general case.
Okay, no, here in the single box Monte Carlo, what happens is that supposing you're talking about crystallization. So let us just take a simple, let us say triangle crystal itself. So what would happen is that if you are plotting the volume versus the temperature, volume being your order parameter at a constant pressure, so the solid would have higher density, right?
Right.
So solid would have higher density, lower volume. So you would have a solid phase which would go like this. Supposing this is your melting point. Okay. So what would happen was that if you do an NPT simulation, you are doing multiple simulations. Okay. And what will happen is because of the interfacial free energy barrier between the solid and liquid phase, you will overshoot this and go like this and go like this. So you're doing multiple simulations and you will miss your correct melting point. And when you are, so this would be what would happen when you are melting. Now, if you are going to the, now if you are doing a solidification, you would be coming in this direction and again you would overshoot it. So what would happen is that you would never get whether you are, so in a pure substance, your melting point and freezing point should be coinciding, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
yes, I'm not talking about polymers. Polymers, of course, have that glass transition and various other things, but
Right.
just think this thing. So what happens is that there is a hysteresis which is there. So you have missed the melting point and the freezing point in both ways because you think this is the melting point and you think this is the freezing point and they are not coinciding. Whereas for a pure substance other than a polymer, a crystal basically, you would expect the melting point to be equal to the freezing point. So that's the problem with this kind of method. And
Right.
the
So,
reason why it's no longer used.
I understand. Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? So I have just one question. Like we have seen for the Brydony pictures how to use the GCT MMC, and there is a change of identity also. Now,
Yeah.
a similar concept can be extended even to the other multi-component systems.
Yes, yes, you can. But for multi-component systems, you can't plot this, right? Because this is no longer 2D there. For binary, this is a nice picture you can see. For multi-component systems, you cannot plot this. So there is a slight variation of the method where you actually plot pi n, where n is equal to summation of ni. Okay. So there's a slight variation of the same method. You do it in the semigrand ensemble and you plot pi n, where n is the total number of particles. And that is the summation of the species, number of particles of species I. So identity change allows you to look at the different compositions there also. Yes. So it's just a slight variation, but yeah, it can be done.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Any questions from the student side? Okay. Okay. I guess students from the student side, there are no more questions in the chat box also. So I request Professor Pradeep to thank our speaker. Yeah, over to you, Professor Pradeep.
Thank you, Professor Adhikari. Nice talk, very. I learned many things, in fact. Though thermodynamics was my favorite subject, but
Oh, that is so nice to know. And that is
yeah,
so rare too.
yeah. So, in fact, when one of my students from HB when I was in BRC, so he was working, he was doing PhD, I was his guide, and from IIT Bombay side, Madhu was.
Oh, okay. Okay. He's
yeah.
the head of the department now.
Yeah, he's head of department now. So that time you were one of the examiners in one of the progress review. So,
Oh, okay. I hope they gave him good grades.
yeah, he was a Vijit Raha. Yeah. So
Okay.
it was nice. Sure. Nice talk. We enjoyed it, and we learned many
Thank
things.
you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. Sure. Can we stop now, Angan?
Yeah, thank you, Professor Tiwari, and Professor Adhikari. We have a nice talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sengupta and Professor Tiwari, for inviting me and listening to me patiently. Thank you very much. So can we close now?
Sure, ma'am.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thanks.